In this video, I'm going to go over an ABC example, activity-based costing, and we'll start by looking at a simple costing example. So in simple costing, we're just going to have one indirect cost pool, one overhead pool, and then we'll allocate that, and then we'll look at the difference in an ABC, where we'll take that one pool and divide it into 3 pools with 3 separate allocation bases, and then allocate them per job. First, we'll go over a simple costing. So simple will only have one indirect cost pool. Then when we get to activity-based, we are going to break this out into more cost pools, theoretically based on a better connection to a cost driver, based on the activity driving the cost of the pool. So in this case, remember, we are always going to come up with a rate to allocate our indirect cost. Direct costs we can add into the job. Indirect we have to allocate somehow, because indirect costs we cannot feasibly trace the cost to the job. In activity-based costing, we're basically saying we can kind of make a stronger connection if we really start to analyze things. So the rate is always the same calculation. It's our total indirect cost pool. And so even when we break this up into multiple pools, for the one pool we're looking at a time. So in the simple costing example, we're going to have one rate because we have one pool. When we get more pools, we will have more rates. And divided by the total allocation base. So remember, IC pool and allocation base are terms for indirect costs. So in this case, we have our total cost of $60,000 of this pool. And we would divide that by the total allocation base, 310 hours. So we would assume that these are budgeted numbers, and we would come up with a rate of $193.55 per hour. Then going forward, when we have a job, then we would times our hours per job, right? So customer 3, 100 hours times our $193.55 per hour rate, and that would give us the total amount of allocated costs. So now to see how we're going to change things for our ABC example, instead of this one cost pool with all of our indirect costs, we are going to break this out into 3 pools. We're going to say, you know what? We can actually relate a lot of these costs to design, our design phase. And these are really product sustaining costs. We don't really know how much we're going to have per job or per item or per service, but we know that they are related to certain types of our jobs or certain types of our products. And so we could allocate, a more complicated product under this model is going to end up with more indirect costs. With setup costs, that tends to be a batch level related to a group. Again, it's still going to be indirect, but we're going to say, we can kind of relate these to groups of projects to allocate them more efficiently. And then production, if we're saying kind of like manufacturing, this could be a unit output type of pool. So now we have our pools. Now we'll have our, instead of just having hours, labor hours, now we will have labor hours for production. That's how we'll allocate production, the same 310 labor hours. But we're only going to allocate that over our production pool. Then for setup, we are going to have the number of setups, and then we can allocate those per job. So 44 setups. And as we go, as we get a job, we will allocate these based on the number each job has. And then lastly, the design. And we'll base this on special study. So we'll examine the design hours and allocate them accordingly. And we're estimating 135. So now instead of one indirect cost rate, we are going to have 3. We'll take design first. Our total cost pool, $20,000, divided by our allocation rate, which design will do on hours, design hours. So divided by 135 design hours. And so that gives us a rate of $148.15 per design hour. The next one is setup. We'll get a setup rate. And that our total pool is $10,000. As you can see here, divided by 44 setups, our total allocation base. And that, if we divide, will give us $227.27 per setup. And then lastly, we have the production pool, which is $30,000 divided by our original 310 hours, the allocation base we used originally, and this will give us $96.77 per labor hour. So now we're allocating things differently than with one indirect pool. And that is all for our ABC example. Thank you.